building fairly ambitious projects for the hackathon. I saw someone is building the bounty dispenser. I wouldn't call it super ambitious, but great for someone, who's just started out doing Solana. So looking forward to that. If you guys did not already know, we're doing a video with Same. So if you want to be in the video, just try to finish the project by day after. We'll release a form, fill the form. If your project is decent enough, we'll get you on the video. All right. Without any further ado, it is 8:04. Let's get into asynchronous JavaScript callbacks and more. Before I give some context of today's video, and do a quick poll to understand how many of us already know this. I would love to give some shout outs, people who have been fast in executing projects. These are two people who built, now this is slightly Web3 related. In yesterday's class we learned about public private keys, and we weren't able to reach the end, but the assignment for yesterday a few people were able to do, even though we weren't able to reach the end where the assignment was actually described. So shout out to both of these guys. $50 each. They basically made a web-based wallet which requires some knowledge about how do you derive public keys from a mnemonic, from a root seed phrase, a lot of things that we were supposed to cover yesterday but did not. So just a shout out, great work, and $50. And someone also created this website, report.100xsteps.com. I don't know if you will use this or not, but they've built this fairly well, by which I mean anyone can come post pirated content and click on submit. This would go to a Google Doc which has been shared with a few companies that take down Telegram groups. So very nice automated process to do this. $100 to them as well. That's enough for the bounties for today. The goal for today's class is understanding what are IO tasks, how are they different from CPU intensive tasks. IO stands for input output. What are callbacks in JavaScript? What are functional arguments? What is asynchronous code? How is it different from synchronous code, through some examples. And then lastly, we'll go through the architecture of how JavaScript executes asynchronous code. This is the goal for today. If we're able to cover this today well, tomorrow's goal is going to be understanding promises, async await, and writing a bunch of common, call them assignments, call them code that you will eventually write anyways. So good to just practice it out right now. I would love to know how many of you already know this, the first part. How many of you already know the goals for today? Do you understand CPU intensive tasks, IO tasks, callbacks, functional arguments? Yes or no? Okay. 40% understand it, 60% don't. So for the 40%, I would say it will be a fairly slow and probably useless class. So feel free to drop off if you want. We'll be going very slow. Feel free to go through the slides, but you will see this isn't like too difficult for you to do. So no point staying and wasting time. I'll go fairly slow. Nothing new, nothing alphas, no more extra thing I will discuss. So feel free to drop off. For the 40%, let's get right into it. This will be the last week where we dive deeper into the internals of JavaScript. Next week onwards, number one, it'll be internals of JavaScript. Next week onwards, number one, it'll become easier because writing HTTP servers, writing backend applications are much more intuitive than trying to understand the syntax. And this is the first roadblock that I see, where people don't understand async JS very well. Promises are something that goes right, which is why we're spending this week on this. This is the first roadblock. After this, for a very long time, you should be fine. So basically try to go through, and if you've generally dropped off from courses, because this is the biggest initial drop off point for a lot of people. All right, let's kick things off with we'll be writing a lot of code throughout. So all slides from slide 1 to slide 9 or 8, I guess, are going to cover a lot of code. The last slide is going to cover some architecture of how this happens under the hood. So I would urge you to open VS Code locally or open Replit. Either is fine. If you already have Node.js locally, then feel free to open VS Code, open an index.js file in there. If that seems too hard right now, it is fine. I will cover it in an offline video. How do you open a JS file in Visual Studio Code? For now, go to replit.com, click on create REPL, select node over here. I repeat, replit.com, create REPL, and then select Node.js as your environment. And let's write all of our code online today. You don't have to run it locally. If you want to, feel free to as well. I'm sure the people who know this, it will take you less than 10 seconds to do it. All right, I'm going to wait 10 seconds and then we will start to write some code. First some basic code, then some mildly advanced code, and then highly asynchronous code. All right. I'll be posting the sound. A few people are asking the offline video for some landing page. We already have the Zerodha one. I'll do the VS Code landing page as well. Not probably, 100% will happen next week. Won't happen today or tomorrow. So feel free to ignore CSS for this week. Cool. Hopefully you already have this running locally. Let's write a very basic function. By now, just to get comfortable with the syntax, try to write this yourself. If you want to copy paste and try it out, that works. Either way, take 30 seconds. Try to write this code. If you're not able to write it in 30 seconds, then it's fine. Then just copy it, paste it, and get comfortable with it. What is this code doing? It is first defining a function. The name of the function is sum. It takes two arguments, a and b, and it returns the sum of a and b. It returns a plus b. We call sum over here. We store the returned value in answer, and then we log. Oh, this is wrong. We should be logging answer over here. We should not be logging sum. I repeat, we should be logging answer over here. If I run this, it prints 5 on the screen because the sum of 2 and 3 is what? It is 5. If I increase this to 30 and 20, it becomes 50. If you remember, we took a side tour last week. What did I ask you to try last week? I asked you, okay, try converting this into a string and see what happens. Do you remember what happened last week when we did this? Will it still return 50 to you? Or will it return something else? If you pass the first argument as a string, what happens? The answer is string gets concatenated. If you're passing in a string, a plus b becomes 20, 30. A new string gets output with 20 as the first thing and 30 as the first thing. Whenever you're concatenating strings, they don't add like numbers. They get added like this. There are ways to get around it. There are two ways of getting around this. Number one, you can use TypeScript. Number two, you can cast it to a number. Let's not go there right now, but feel free to Google this after. Maybe don't Google TypeScript if you're a complete beginner, but you can always cast it to a number, or parse it to a number is probably a better way to put it. Basically, you can do something like this: parse int of a plus parse int of b. What this will do is, if this is a string, it will first parse it down to a number, and then same for the second argument, and then the numbers would get added, which is why the answer now is 50. So there are ways of making your code more safe, but let's not go there right now. Let's just focus on fairly simple JavaScript code. How does the thread run? What happens when I click on the run button? First, this line of code executes, nothing is here. Then the function gets put somewhere in memory. Function does not get called. I repeat, when I click on the run button, thread reaches here, thread reaches here. It understands that there is a function called sum. Then it reaches here. Here, it actually calls the sum function, returns a plus b, that gets stored over here, and then the last line of code gets run. This is how the JavaScript thread executes for this very basic JavaScript code that we have written. Let's write another code. Again, try to write this yourself, take 30 seconds. Write a function called sum, which takes n as an input and finds the sum from 1 to n. Now, all the DSA folks already know you can do this without a for loop. There's a mathematical formula that you can run, and you can do this in order 1. But let's say you're supposed to write it in a slightly more complicated way. Then here is a hint slash the solution only. Try to write this yourself if you want. Quickly try to create a function that takes n as an input, which is you want to find the sum from 1 to n. So if n is 2, then what will this return? It will return 1 plus 2 equal to 3. If n is 5, what will it return? It will return 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 equal to whatever that is. I think it's 15. I could be wrong. I think so. Yeah, 15. So can you quickly try to write this based on the knowledge we had last week, how to write a for loop and things like these, then try to call it for some number and log it on the screen. Take 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and try to finish this function body. Meanwhile, let me open Q&A and see if people have any specific doubts. What is cin in JS? I'm assuming you mean how can I take arguments from the terminal over here in JavaScript. There are various ways. Easiest is you whenever you're starting the application, you won't be able to do it in Replit, but when you're doing it locally, are there any assignments for when you're doing it locally? Let me just this looks decent. I don't think I've shared anything I shouldn't have. When you're starting the process locally, you can pass in whatever number you want as an argument. Node index.js 100, and then you can catch the argument over here. I don't remember exactly how. The other thing you can do is you can pass it as an environment variable, number equal to 100 node index.js, and then you can get the number over here as process.env.number. These are two ways. You can take inputs, but feel free to Google it as well. It's not. I understand why you're asking this question, because mostly when you write this in C++, you take the input from the user. You can do it in JavaScript as well. I'm sure you can do it, accept it as a input from the user as well. You might have to use some library, but here are two other ways to do it. Pass it as an environment variable, or pass it as an node index.js, and the first argument. All right. Where to see the slides? Send link. The slides are always present on projects.100xdeps.com. Let me paste them in chat as well. Few people have written the solution. Some people have written the more optimized solution. I think we have a minute. A minute is gone. So let's quickly code this. The smart people, or DSA folks, wrote something like this, because that is the answer. Return n into n plus 1. This is just a mathematical formula. If you've done IIT JEE days preparation, this is a common mathematical formula that If you want to find the sum from 1 to x, the answer is x into x plus 1. Or you can write a more complicated for loop. Let answer equal to 0. For let I equal to 0 or 1, I less than equal to n, I plus plus, answer equal to answer plus I, and then return answer. And then you can just log it over here. If I run this, seems like it's working correctly. Let me open the slides again. Someone asked, are there any assignments for today? Not that I've put on the slides. I'm trying to think if I can find something. Yeah, try to create promisified asynchronous functions. Google this. How can you create promisified asynchronous functions? Try to, let me just quickly write this down for all the advanced people who already know everything. Try to create a promisified version of set timeout, fetch. Yeah, try these two to begin with. I think fetch already is promisified, but okay. Maybe one more thing would be fs.read file. This is the assignment. Feel free to take a screenshot. I'll open this for 3 seconds. If you already know all of this, try to do this assignment and go from there. Alrighty, we can write some basic JavaScript code. One thing to know about this basic JavaScript code is this is synchronous JavaScript code. Harkirat, what is synchronous JavaScript code? We'll get to. But high level, any code in which every line is running by a single thread at a time. I repeat, any line over here is being run by the thread one line at a time. When you click on the run button, first your thread goes over here, then it goes over here, then it goes inside the answer function, then it runs here, then it runs the for loop a few times. There is a single execution context that is going through line by line. You are never running two lines together. Though you can't do that in asynchronous code also, but a good way to create intuition for synchronous code is when the code begins to run, only thing that is dictating where the which line of code is running is purely based on, first line you're in, then you're in this line, then this called the sum function, then you reached here, then because this is a for loop, you ran this 100 times, then you returned whatever answer was. Control reached here, control reached here. This is synchronous code. We'll very soon get into what is asynchronous code, but all the code we have written until now, defining variables, defining functions, calling functions, writing a for loop, whenever you run this code, this is synchronous code execution. What is synchronous code? Synchronous code is executed line by line in the order in which it is written. This is the sort of important part. Even asynchronous code runs line by line now that I think of it, but it runs out of order. We will come to what out of order is. For synchronous code, it runs in the order in which it is written. Each operation waits for the previous one to complete before moving on to the next line. For example, if we write this specific code, can you quickly do a sudo run of this code in your head? What would happen if I call the sum function 1, 2, 3 times? First, the control will reach here, then it will reach here, then it will go to the sum function. This variable will be defined. For loop will run 100 times. It will get returned. Control will reach here. Answer will get logged. Then the same thing will happen for answer 2. Then the same thing will happen for answer 3. One after the other, after the other. This is sequential code execution. This is synchronous code. First this runs, then this runs, then this runs. This is significantly different from how asynchronous code runs. We'll get to that very soon. But hopefully this is straightforward. Okay, when you write code, just like we've been writing it until this point, we are writing synchronous code. It gets executed line after line. It gets executed in the order in which it is written. जो भी ऊपर लिखा होगा, whatever is written above, gets executed first. It goes from the top, and line by line by line by line, code starts to get executed. Let's discuss the first jargon for today. IO heavy operations. Input output heavy operations. IO heavy operations refers to a task in a computer program that involves a lot of data transfer between a program and an external system or device. Can you think of a few examples? What does it say? Okay. Input output heavy operations refer to a task in a computer program that involves a lot of data transfer between the program and some other hardware. A good example of this is if you ever want to read a file. I repeat, if you ever want to read a file using Node.js, you can do that. We'll do that very soon. If this is your index.js file, if this is your JavaScript code, and you write some code over here, okay, bhai, read file a.txt. Let's say you write this code. This file needs to be read from the operating system. We need to do what's called an IO operation, an input output operation. We are asking the operating system कि hey, there is another file here called a.txt जिसके अंदर some content is written, inside which some content is written. Let's say, hi there, please give me the contents of this file so I can put this inside a variable. Let's say something like this, where a equal to read file. So if I write this line of code in JavaScript, it's significantly different from another line of code that does this, where a equal to hi there. This defines a string in memory right here. This needs to do a input output operation. This needs to do something extremely heavy. Harkirat, what do you mean by heavy? I mean this could take 1 second, this could take 10 seconds. It depends on whether or not the operating system is complying with you. Maybe this file is already busy. Maybe this file is opened by someone else and the OS doesn't let you access it. Maybe this file doesn't exist only. The operating system, throws an error and tells you this file doesn't exist. So defining a variable like this is very easy and is what's called a CPU intensive task. This isn't an intensive task as such, but this is a task that happens like this immediately. This line of code runs, you move on to the next line of code, versus this line of code could take a really long time. If there is, a statement after this, something like console.log hello, you might be stuck at this line of code for 2 seconds and only after that will hello run. Let's try this out. Let's try to write this code that does a IO heavy operation, that does something that is outside the index.js file, outside the JavaScript context. It tries to fetch some external data. These operations usually require waiting for the data to be read or written from sources like disks, network, databases, or other external devices, which can be time consuming compared to in-memory computations. In-memory computations, doing where a equal to hello or whatever, hi there, is much faster versus reading it from a file is incredibly slow, like comparatively slower. Examples of IO heavy operations: reading from a file that I just shared, starting a clock. This basically means if you want to deliberately run some code after 1 second, or your thread to wait for 1 second, if you write code that looks like this, wait for 1 second, then again this is a sort of a IO heavy operation. You are waiting for 1 second. The thread will be stuck over here. This is not technically true, but you will be stuck over here for 1 second before the next line of code runs. So that is another common IO heavy operation. HTTP requests basically means, if I ever want to fetch some data from Google, let's say, if I want to, now this will be more clear next week. But whenever you go to a website, I repeat, whenever you guys went to projects.100xdevs.com/tracks, this specific URL, you sent a bunch of what are called HTTP requests, hypertext transfer protocol requests. If you want to see all of them in action, you can right click, click on inspect, go to the network tab here. If you refresh, you will see a bunch of HTTP requests go out. All of these requests are going to a server. The server is responding back with it. Even when you go to, this website, projects.100xdevs.com, you press enter, a request goes to a server in Mumbai. You get some HTML data from that server. That can also take a really long time. We are going to introduce, let's write the code for reading through a file, or reading a file from your file system. For this, we need to understand how you require other modules. I repeat, we are going to introduce something new right now. If you look at this code, it's just 3 lines of code, but we require, or we depend on, another library called FS. FS stands for file system. Let's try to copy this code. Let's paste it in Replit, and let's try to understand what is happening. First line of code, what we're doing here, if you've done Java, if you have imported something from another, package, it's the same thing. If you have done C++, you write, whatever, I totally forgot, hashtag include stdio.h, something like this at the top of your CPP file. Similarly, in case of JavaScript, if you want to use someone else's code, in this case, we want to use the FS library, which is part of Node.js, but you still have to import it. So this is how you import the FS library. Once you have this FS variable, this is a library that is written by some really smart people. They have written all the logic to read contents from a file, to read some contents from a file and return you back the contents. You are just importing their library and using a function called read file sync. I repeat, the function is called read the file synchronously. This is the path to the file, a.txt. This is the encoding in which you want the data. If you don't understand what encoding is, there are various ways you can read data. You can read it as bytes, you can read it as hex. We discussed this a little bit yesterday in the Web3 class. UTF-8 is simple English language encoding. In our case, the file that I will be creating, I repeat, the file that I will be creating, I will create, and you should do this as well if you're trying this locally. Create a file called a.txt, put some contents in there, let's say hi there, save it, and then try to run this code. I repeat, what have I done? Other than writing the code over here, I have also created a file called a.txt, inside which I've put hi there, contents like this. Now if I try to run again, what does the code say? Import the FS library. After you have imported the FS library, call the function called read file sync on this fs variable. Now some of you might be very confused, Harkiyat, what is fs dot read file sync? Little bit, if you remember from last week, we learned about objects. We learned about where user equal to age 21, name Harkirat. If you remember this from yesterday. Yesterday we were doing this, or last week we were doing this. Okay, console.log user.name. So just how you can do a user.name which points to a string, or a user.age which points to a number, you can do a user dot, calculate age, let's say, which is a function. I repeat, I can add a third argument here called calculate age, which is a function. If you don't understand the syntax, it is fine. We'll be discussing this in more detail as we, dive into more complex objects. But the attribute can also be a function, which, let's say returns 10. So if I call this, this will return 10, it will print 10 on the screen. That is exactly what is happening here. fs is an object. It has a key called read file synchronously, just like I have a key called calculate age over here. And this points to a function. If I hover over this, it says this is a function which takes the path as the input, some options as the input, and returns something. Don't worry about, all of this function signature might feel a little complicated. But I hope you understand how can I do fs.read file sync, because this itself is a function, because fs is an object. You can also log fs over here and you will see read file sync is an attribute there. First argument is where to find the file. Second argument is the encoding. If I log this, you will see it logs hi there on the screen over here. What happens if I replace this with a file that doesn't exist, b.txt? It'll throw an error. What does it say? No such file or directory opening b.txt. So if the file exists, I see the contents of the file. If the file doesn't exist, an error is thrown. Is this synchronous code or is this asynchronous code? Let's do a quick poll. What do you think? I've been talking about, there is something called synchronous code. There is something called asynchronous code. Oh, do you understand? I guess that's the better question first. Only 84% understand what is happening. 16% don't understand what is happening. Let me look at Q&A and see what is up. Again, if you're a moderate to advanced person, feel free to drop off or do the assignment. Can you display the assignment again? Yes, the assignment was this thing right here. Quick revision, please. Let me do that. Please have bounty for beginners. We will see. In VS Code oils, please explain again. Error while having the same file. Maja aa raha hai. Posted the tweet before the other guy. Sorry, I might have missed it. Repeat once. How do we run it locally? Chalo. Let's run this code locally now. Some people want to run it locally. To run it locally, you have to install Node.js first. So the first thing you have to do is search for install Node.js. I am not doing it in this class, but go over here, try to install Node.js on your machine. Windows people are going to struggle really bad. So for those people, I would say stick to VS Code for now and try to do this after the class. How do you know you have Node.js running locally? If you open a terminal, let me open this on the right so people can see the assignment. This is the assignment for the advanced folks for today. And try to not Google it or ChatGPT, or maybe Google a little bit if you don't understand the problem statement only, but try to write the whole thing yourself. This will give you a decent idea of promises. For everyone else, first, how do you know you have Node.js? If you type NODE, you should see something like this. That's how you know you have Node.js. If this throws an error, it means you don't have Node.js. Step 2 is creating an empty project. So let me create an empty project locally. Now I am using my terminal to do this. You don't have to. You can do something like this. Open your file explorer, create a fresh folder, call it Week2 JS practice. What is it called? Week2 JS practice. Open this folder in Visual Studio Code. So open Visual Studio Code locally, click on file, click on open, and then select the right folder, which in my case is going to be Week-2-JS JS practice. The empty folder that I had just created, I am opening in Visual Studio Code. This is the folder. I click on open. How did I do it? File, open, and then I selected the right folder. Now here, I will create index.js. I will create a.txt. Now I am trying to run the same code locally. Here I will write hi there, and in index.js I will require, write the code const, what was it? Data equal to fs dot read file sync, and then console.log data. Let me turn off AI over here. So this is the code that I had written on Replit. Now I have the same code running locally. Const data equal to fs.read file sync. This is where the file can be found. ./a.txt. If it feels confusing, hopefully a.txt also works. If it doesn't work, then I'm happy to share what ./ means over here. We will be covering this when we reach the bash section. All right, let's do node index.js, and it prints hi there locally now. So I've been able to run the same code locally. What does the code do? Imports an external library, calls fs.read file synchronously, and then logs the data over here. I haven't shared anything extra than what I had shared, on Replit. But let me do a quick poll and go from there. Do we understand this code now? Ended. What the hell? How do you relaunch the poll? Zoom is not zooming, guys. Sorry about that. Zoom isn't letting me do the poll. We'll wait for some time and do the poll. Question is, can I assume you guys understood everything and proceed? Let me look at the slides and see what the next thing is. Okay, the next thing is try this out. This though you should try to code yourself. Given this code, can you write the code to read from two files, a.txt, b.txt, and log the contents of both of them? Given this code, can you create another file called b.txt, hello from b.txt, and can you change the code a bit so that both of them log? Pehle A ka contents log, then B ka contents log. Why am I hearing someone from time to time? Has my machine been hacked today? Do this for the next 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then we'll go from there. Please ask AK to mute. Acha ye hai kya? Sorry about that. Akash, can you mute? UTF-8 significance. Let me just mute him. Oh, I don't see him anymore. Okay, he muted, I think. No, he did not. All right, let's look at what people are saying in Q&A. Can object name and library be the same? Can object name and library be the same? It can be different as well. If this is what you're worried about, you can write FSA over here. Cont FSA equal to require FS. This and this can be different. Not able to understand the diff between synchronous and asynchronous. We haven't yet gotten there, so don't worry about it. We are writing simple synchronous code for now. What is FS? It is an external library that stands for file system. What is an external library? Okay, bhai, you can't simply write this fs.read file. No. This, if you try to write this and run node index.js, it still works. No, I didn't save the file. It throws an error. It says fs is not defined. Okay, bhai, what is this fs? I can't simply write read file sync. It says read file sync is not defined. You have to require another external library. What is this external library? FS in Node.js. If I search this, what does it point me to? Node.js file system. These are the official docs. These are the W3 schools docs. The Node.js file system module. Module means something that other people have written. You are using their module. Allows you to work with the file system on your computer. Allows you to work with the file system. Okay, if I want to read this file and this file, I will use the fs module. What does module mean? An external library that other people have written. I am just requiring their code over here. I am just trying to use the work that they have done over here. And how do I use their work? By calling fs dot, a function that they have written. I just call the function. It does all the expensive heavy things for me, and then I just log them over here. Do we understand external modules, fs, and everything we've done here? Let's do a quick poll again if it works now. Let's see. Let me try to create another poll and see if that does it. Yes. No. All right. We now understand it. Sort of. 90%. Decent, not great. 90% is not great. Let me answer Q&A for another 2 minutes. Considering this is very easy. If this is also at 90%, the drop off after this is going to be huge. Samajh nahi aaya. I am very beginner. It is fine. We will talk through it. Do we remember Node.js and Express syntax? You don't need to remember it, but doesn't hurt. I'm able to run it. I'm not able to run it locally. How can I run it locally? If you can't run it locally, after the class, try to run Node.js, install Node.js locally. For now, run all of this code on REPL. Go to REPL.it, create a new Node.js REPL, and paste the code over here. Try to run it over here. It's not working on my laptop. Same answer. How to get it is very easy. I know. Is require a library? No. Require is not a library. It is a syntax that you write. I want to require this specific external module. I am trying to import this specific external module. Can we use let? You can use let over here. And try this out locally. Convert this to a let. Click on run. It will work for you. That tells you can use let. Isn't this similar to writing contents to a file then calling it? It is similar to writing contents in a file and calling it. This is not a thread. What is UTF-8? A lot of people are asking what is UTF-8. Let's not write UTF-8. Let's do this. Let's do fs.read file sync a.txt. What does it return you? It returns you something very weird. Buffer 68, 69, 20. What is this 68, 69, 20? If you remember a little bit from yesterday's class, if you are in the Web3 cohort, this is another encoding. This is another way. This is probably an array of bytes. An array of a bunch of bytes, which probably h in ASCII is 68. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. ठीक है, हमने UTF-8 नहीं किया. I did not put UTF-8 over here. What happened? It returned me an array of bytes. What does array of bytes mean, Harkirat? Okay, basically it converted h to its byte representation. Harkirat, why is h ka byte representation 68? ASCII characters. If you search ASCII characters and go to this first page, it will show you, okay, bhai, if you want to see h, then h ka is 72, 68. No, it is something else. Someone probably knows in chat. 68, 69, 20, 74, 68, 65, 72, 65. What is 65? 65 is A. No, it is a different way to. Can someone in chat tell me if someone knows what this specific encoding is? Let's see if someone in chat knows. I would have assumed it's just a byte representation of all the numbers, but it isn't. It is hex. Someone is saying, I don't think it's hex. Doesn't look like hex. Someone said lowercase. What does that mean? Unicode. A lot of people are writing Unicode. Unicode. No, never mind. Let me not go off track here. But do you see if I don't write UTF-8 over here, then it gives me something, the data in a different format. Versus if I tell it, okay, bhai, the encoding. What is encoding? Again, we discussed this yesterday, but various ways in which you can, the bytes that you have read from a file, you can represent them in various ways. One of them, the human readable, jo hame samajh aata hai, this specific format, high there, is called UTF-8, which is, what you see here. If you tell this function, okay, bhai, read file synchronously in this specific format, if you Google UTF-8, what does it say? UTF-8 is a encoding defined by it represents these many code points. UTF-8 is the one way to represent English language. I repeat, okay, the bytes that you have read, the data that you have read from here, you can write this in various formats. Hex is one format, one encoding in which you can write it. Base 64 is another encoding that you can write it in. Harkiyat, what is hex? What is base encoding? Don't worry about now. UTF-8 is the third encoding in which you can write it. And UTF-8 is the most human readable one जो हमें समझ आती है, which is why we tell the read file sync function के इस format में दो. Okay. Now let's do maybe one more. I mean, I don't think the results would matter at all. We will have to proceed either way. But how are we doing now? Are we at 95%? Early class, which is why I want to try to aim for at least 95%. Okay. Maybe it's just a lot of recapping that we have to do. Great. 95 is great. Were you guys able to write this code as well? To read from two files. What is the code to read from two files? Okay, bhai, पहले से read कर लो. Read from the first file, then read from the second file. Sequentially, I repeat, first this line of code will run. This might take 1 second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds to be read. Then we will log this. Then I will read the second file. This might again take 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then I will log this. Let's see what happens when I run node index.js. Hi there, hello from bt.txt. So the code is working as expected, but there is one performance downside to this code. Read file sync. What is this function called? Read file sync. If I delete sync from here, you will see even read file is a function. So the fs library gives you two types of functions, a read file function and a read file sync function. As the name suggests, this is reading the file synchronously. And can you guess what the read file function does? It reads the file asynchronously. Now what is this? What is this? How are they different? Let's try to understand in the next slide. One small side tour before we proceed is what are IO bound tasks, what are CPU bound tasks. Can you guess over here what is the IO input output bound task? It is this line right here. This line wants an input from the file system, which is why it's a IO bound task. Versus if you write a for loop like this just has to run a bunch of lines of code on the CPU, which is why this is a CPU bound task. When you're writing for loops, when you're writing simple code, console.log hi, if else statements, that is a CPU bound task because the CPU needs to run all of these lines one by one. Versus when you are reading a file, then you just ask the operating system कि भाई ये file read कर दे, can you read this file? And then the OS figures out, do you have access? Might take 1 second, might take 10 seconds, and your program remains sort of idle during that time. I repeat, when this line of code is running, then the file is being read, but your program is sort of empty. वैसे वेला बैठा है कि ठीक है भाई, I तो delegated this task to the operating system. It is reading it. My CPU is not doing anything right now, which is why it is IO bound. It is bound by the input output. कि भाई, this depends on the input output, how much time it takes. Versus if I have a for loop, that depends on your CPU. If your CPU is fast, then these lines of code will run really fast. Doing an IO bound task in the real world. Let's try to take a real world example of a IO bound task. Let's say you were tasked to do 3 things. I ask you to do 3 things: boil some water, do some laundry, and send a package via mail. Boil some water, do some laundry, and send a package via physical mail. Would you do them one by one? Okay, pehle I will boil the water, I will turn on the gas, wait for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes are done, then I will start to do laundry, wait for it to wash. Half an hour I will sit in front of it. Then I will go out and do this. Will you do them one after the other after the other? How much time will it take here? 20 minutes plus 30 minutes plus 10 minutes, let's say. So this took you 1 hour to do. If you do this one by one, if you do this synchronously, look at our code. I first read this. If it takes 10 seconds, I wait over here. If my water is boiling, I'm sitting in front of it and waiting. When you run code synchronously, you wait for that to happen. Even if it takes 10 seconds, 20 seconds, JavaScript is sitting idle over here, waiting कि यार कभी ना कभी ये बताएंगे हमें, तो we will move on. I am waiting, and once I get the contents, I log them. And similarly again, I am waiting and then I log them. Sequential execution. Number 2, context switch between them. Or would you do something like this कि यार मैं जल्दी से गैस चला देता हूँ, let me turn on the gas and then let me quickly move on to the laundry, and then let me go out and go to the mailbox, submit the mail. While I'm submitting the mail, let me quickly come back, check on the gas. Is it done? Then I will move on to the laundry again and check is it done, and keep context switching between all three of them. Or start all these together and wait for them to finish. The first one that gets gets catered to first. Second and three are actually fairly close, so feel free to ignore third for now. ठीक है? To keep things simple. वैसे तो more technically third is what JavaScript does, or asynchronous JavaScript does. But चलो for now, keeping things simple. Which one of these is better approach, 1 or 2? If you think 1 is the better approach, then select yes. If you think 2 is the better approach, then select no. Which one do you think is the better approach? Is it 1? Then select yes. Is it 2? Then select no. Most people have selected no, that is 80%, but 20% think 1 is the better approach. How? Think of it, unless you're playing with me, why would 1 be the better approach? I'm sure some of you have good reasons in chat. So why do you think 1 is the better approach? Anyone have a decent reason? It depends. Memory loss, time speed, focus. Okay, error handling, just for fun. All right, 1 is the worst approach because it takes a much longer time. तुम 20 मिनट यहाँ बैठोगे, you will first sit here for 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, then 10 minutes. It will take you 1 hour. Versus if you context switch between them, you turn on the gas, you move to the laundry, you put your clothes, you go to the place, then it takes you 10 minutes here, you come back, and keep checking between these two. Okay, are you done? Okay, you are not done. Are you done? You are not done. Are you done? You are not done. And then eventually, let's say laundry finishes first, or boiling finishes first in 20 minutes. You turn it off. You find laundry is done in 30 minutes. You turn it off. It only took you 30 minutes in case 2. It took you 1 hour in case 1, which is why the second approach is better. Running code asynchronously, running IO bound tasks asynchronously is a better option. Even though this read file sync function exists, you should not use this function. You should use the read file function. Let's see how that works. This is how we have written code until now. First require fs, then read the first file, log it, read the second file, log it, read the third file, log it. This is how we're doing tasks. 1, then the second, then the third. Versus now I'm going to blast you with some very heavy asynchronous code that uses functional arguments. So don't get overwhelmed. We will try to understand this slightly better very soon. But if you look at this code, it will run all three of these sort of parallelly. It will run this, it will run this, it will run this. Harkirat, how is that happening? We'll come to very soon. But this code is running all three of them parallelly, and then जो भी पहले read हो जाएगा. If this file is read first, this will get logged. If this is read second, then this will get logged. This is read third, this will get logged. Question is, how does this code over here run? How is it different? How is this read file function different from the read file sync function over here? And lastly, look at the arguments here. First argument is fine. Second argument is fine. Third argument is a function. It is a function. An argument is a function. So before we proceed and actually understand this code, we need to understand something called functional arguments. After we do this slide, I'm happy to take a break because this is a mildly not advanced slide, but this goes over your head the first time you're watching it. So first let's understand functional arguments. Then I will take you back to this code that I just showed you in the last slide, and we will try to understand this lines of code next. First, let's understand a very simple example of functional arguments. If I ask you to write a calculator program that adds, subtracts, multiplies and divides two arguments, how will you write it? Will you write code that looks something like this? A sum function that returns a plus b, a multiply function that returns a into b, subtract returns a minus b, divide returns a divided by b. Both the approaches look the same. This was supposed to be, ignore this function over here. Okay? In the first approach, ignore this function. Look at how I'm logging it. I simply call sum of 1, 2. If I want to find the sum, I will call sum of 1, 2. Hopefully this code is straightforward. If I paste this, let me also delete the do operation thingy. I have defined 4 functions. If I want to find the sum, I will do console.log sum of 1, 2. If this feels jarring, I can do something like this: const answer equal to sum of 1, 2 and then console.log answer. If I run this, I see 3 over here. If I change sum to, whatever, subtract, then, I see -1 over here. Hopefully this is straightforward. I have just defined 4 functions and I'm calling the right function over here. This is hopefully simple. Now comes approach number 2, which is where we use functional arguments. What does the name say? Passing a function as an argument to another function. I repeat, what are we doing now? Functional arguments, which is passing a function to another function as an argument. If you understand this, half of your battle is done, and the other half of the battle would be tomorrow when we understand promises. But this is the concept that flies over beginners, most people's head initially. This is where the drop off happens. So try to understand this. What does this say? Passing a function to another function as an argument. Let's look at this code. First, though, I have defined 4 functions, and the 5th function takes 3 arguments: a, b, and another function. What is op? This is a number. This is a number. The 3rd argument it expects is a function, a functional argument. If you look at how I'm calling it, I call do operation 1, 2, sum. I am passing this function as an argument over here. And what am I doing in the function body? I am simply calling that function with these arguments. What will happen when this code runs? Let me copy this code and paste it in Replit. What do you think happens when I run this? Let me make this easier to write. Const answer equal to this thing and then console.log answer. If you look at this code, we called do operation 1, 2 and sum. What will happen is the 3rd argument here will become something like this: function op return a plus b. What will happen is, if I'm passing sum as the 3rd argument here becomes the specific function. Now, first thing that people will be confused with, Kirat, you passed sum over here. How did the name change? You can name functions anything. I can name this as, dumb arg, and I can return whatever op of dumb arg over here. So just because I've written sum over here doesn't mean the argument needs to be sum. If you ignore all of this, if I'm calling divide, I can call it with any variable name. I can call it with 1, 2, or I can define a variable, let x equal to 1. I can call it with x, x. So just because the variable I'm passing in is x doesn't mean the argument here needs to be called x. It can be called a, b, dumb arg, whatever you want. Going back to the code, what did I say? Okay, the do operation function takes 3 arguments: a, b, and then a function, and it just calls the function on those arguments. You can also write something like this: let val equal to operation of a, b. So if the input is sum, it will call sum of a comma b and return val. If the input is divide, then it will call divide. This will get replaced by divide and it will return the division of a comma b, so on and so forth. If I run this, if you look at it, it returns me 0.5 because if you divide 1 by 2, it is 0.5. What were the three arguments here? A was 1, B was 2, and op was divide. So what will this line of code become? It will become divide of 1 comma 2. And what happens when you divide 1 by 2? Control will reach here, and then this will return a divided by b, which will get stored here. That is what we will return from here. It will get stored in this answer. So what are we trying to learn from this experiment? We are trying to learn about functional arguments. You might ask here, this looks like a very dumb example, and the answer is yes. You can simply call divide of 1 comma 2. You don't have to define this do operation variable. We have just done it to understand callbacks or functional arguments slightly better. But sure, this is a dumb example, and there are better examples too, how and when you should pass a functional argument. We will be coming to a better example in the next slide. But for now, do we understand how functions can take numbers as an input and also another function as an input? When they do take another function as an input and you call them, you can call that generic function. I'm calling it generic because this can be anything. This can be sum, this can be divide, this can be, subtract, so on and so forth. Whatever is the function is what gets called. Harkirat, what if I pass a string over there? What if I pass a number over here? What will happen if you ever try to do this 33 and call it? It will throw an error, right? Similarly, if you pass the third argument as 33, this line will get replaced by 33 of this thing, which will throw an error. Let's try that out. What does it say? Op of a comma b. Op is not a function. 33 is not a function. So if you try to pass in a number, a string, something dumb over here, op will get replaced by 33. 33 is not a function. That is exactly what the error is telling you over here. Let's do a poll. Let's see, do we understand functional arguments? If we understand functional arguments, then callbacks will be very easy. If we understand callbacks, then asynchronous code will be very easy. But the first foundational thing to understand well is functional arguments. We sort of understand it, 92%. Decent start. If you don't understand it right now, it's fine. We'll do doubt session also. More specifically, next slide will make it slightly more clearer, where we understand some asynchronous code and callbacks. What we did in the last slide was functional arguments. What we are doing in this slide is callbacks. Let's look at the code to read a file asynchronously. Now, Harkirat, what is asynchronously? We will get to chalo. But abhi tak, what was the code that we wrote? We wrote code that looked like this. fs.read file a.txt utf8. We logged the contents in the next line. I told you, sorry, this was the code that we wrote. Oh, sorry, I said we'll do a small break. I think we're going fairly simple, so I don't think we need a break, but let me know. Do you guys need a break? Yes or no? Oh boy. It's 50-50, which means a very small break, 3-minute break. Then we'll proceed. I'm looking at Q&A for 3 minutes. Then we will proceed. If you think it's going fairly slow, if you understand this slide, and if you already have gone through this latent flip visualization, you are good to go for today. There's nothing else we will cover today. 3-minute break, then we will proceed. But if you understand this, if you understand callback queues, event loop, then you're good to go. Feel free to drop off. I'm going to take a small 3-minute break. Look at Q&A until then. Go back to the relevant slide here. Q&A. More JavaScript offline videos. 5-minute break. Alrighty. Where to submit the assignments? There's no place to submit assignments. You can just do them yourself. We will have a GitHub repository very soon for all these JavaScript code. But there also there's no. You can just run the tests locally. So we'll share a video on how you can do that. But you just have to run npm run test locally, and then it'll work. Alright. Someone created a read file promisified. That looks right to me. Can you make it more generic? Can you I mean, it should be fairly easy if you've done this. Add encodings as an argument, yeah, everything else is fine. You're doing, yeah, everything else is fine. अभी तक सिर्फ auth पे आया हूँ for hackathon, building this bounty dispenser, nice. I did not notice your tweet, but I'll just tweet again. I'll notice it. 2 more minutes, and we will start. Node.js versus Bun. Either is fine. I mean, Bun is slightly faster. They not slightly faster, like probably significantly faster is their claim. So use either. As an application developer, it doesn't matter. You can write the same code. So it doesn't matter. It's like very easy to flip from one to another. The third way to do real world tasks is asynchronous. Ideally, I mean, I'll discuss this very soon, but yes, the second way isn't really how JavaScript does asynchronous code. This one, JavaScript does it this way. There's a very subtle difference between both of them, which is why, it doesn't matter to pick any, as long as you understand that the tasks are happening concurrently. And if someone is also like, if you understand a lot of things and you want a good video to look at, this is an amazing video. It will take you through the difference of concurrency and parallelism. Not relevant for this class, but a good video to look at irrespective. Extra class Web3 will be appreciated. Sounds good. Video about, that's how you should ask. Now you will get Web3 videos. Appreciate it. Such a polite way to ask. Video about methods of strings and objects. Yes, we already have this from last cohort. Even map filter, etc. we have from last cohort. Even classes we have from last cohort. So basically we have very nice offline videos. I can just put them this week. Latent flip link. It is this thing right here. I mean, you won't understand it if you've not already gone through it. But let me still paste it in chat. All right. Break ends right here. Let's go through some more functional arguments, more specifically asynchronous code. What did I tell you 2 slides ago? Okay, what we want is that तीनों tasks happen parallelly. All 3 tasks at least start parallelly. Okay, you start boiling it, you start the washing machine, you start walking to the post office. You cannot do that if you're writing code like this. अगर तुम code ऐसे लिख रहे हो, if you're writing code like this, this is going to be the first file read, this is going to be the second file read, then the way you have written code right now, how does JavaScript run? पहले this line of code will run, then this line of code will run. Until this line of code succeeds, it will not move on to the next line. Then this line of code will run. Until this line of code succeeds, it will not move on to the next line. So this was synchronous execution. This was I have started boiling the water and I am staring at it throughout. Even though this is an IO bound operation, even though this depends on someone else, gas chalane ke baad, it is not in your control. You don't need any brain power after that. You don't need any CPU after that. After you have asked the operating system for the file, ab us pe hai bhai, how much long it takes. After you have started the gas, now it's on the heat of the room, how fast your gas is, how much long it takes for it to get boiled. You are sitting idle. Similarly, our JavaScript thread is sitting idle over here. Wouldn't it be nice if we call read file and tell it कि भाई जब भी तू हो जाएगा ना, whenever you are done executing, whenever the file is read, call this read function. Let's say I'm going to define a function called read, which takes 2 arguments. Now, why does it take 2 of these arguments? What are these 2 arguments? We will understand very soon. But it takes 2 arguments, and here I'm going to log data. Why does the function signature look like this? Is something we will get to very soon. But I define a function separately, and I say कि भाई जब तेरा हो गया ना, whenever you are done executing, please call the read function. Now this is throwing an error because I haven't put a comma over here. And same thing over here, read file. Now I am not calling the read file sync function. I am calling the read file async function. I am not calling the read file sync function. I am calling the read file async function. Harkirat, why haven't you written async? It's not called. The function signature is this only. It is an asynchronous function. What does it mean? What does it mean for it to be an asynchronous function? कि भाई तुमने task start कर दिया. The task has been started. The file is being read. When the task is done, your washing machine starts to do a teen, right? When it is done, washing your clothes. Similarly, this asynchronous function will call back the third argument. I repeat, this asynchronous function, whenever it is done, whenever the operating system is done reading the file, it will call back this read function. Calling back means कि तुमने तो उनको यहीं दे दिया था. You gave it the read function right here. Whenever it was able to read it, it called it back. Just how your washing machine calls you back once it is done washing your clothes. It will start to make a noise and call you back. Similarly, the read function will call back this, read file function will call back this, let's call it a print function. So it's, you don't get, this can be anything. You can name it anything, doesn't matter. To remove some confusion, let me rename this to print. And just changing the code this much, a little bit, I have a lot of performance benefits. What are the performance benefits? The same thing that I shared in this slide. Okay, now I am not doing this one by one. I am starting this and this together. Whenever this is done, it will call my print function. Whenever this is done, it will call my print function. I also don't need this. I've added another log over here called done. Just as a thought experiment, what do you think gets logged over here first? Does a.txt get printed first? Does this callback get called first? Does this get called first? Or does done get called first? Very famous interview problem. You'll see variations of this. Okay, put a set timeout over here. If you don't understand this line of code, it's fine. But something like this. This is like a very common interview question. Okay, what will get logged first? This get logged first, this get logged first. Will this hello get logged first? Will this done get logged first? You might have already seen this commonly asked question. Can you guess? Let's try to run it. Let's do a node index.js. Done gets logged first, then hi there, then hello from b.txt. Do you see a problem? Here first this line should have run, then this line should have run. This line should have logged first. So hi there should have been logged first. But hi there gets logged after done. Why? Because first this line of code runs, then the function gets, whatever, registered. Then you call read file. This isn't synchronous anymore. You aren't starting the boiling water and waiting for it. You are telling it, ke bhai, washing machine, I'm starting you. Whenever you're done, call back print and you move on. You started the washing machine, you moved on to boiling the water. You started the boiling water, you moved on to going for a walk. So you aren't waiting for the IO to happen. You are not synchronously waiting for the IO to happen. Whenever the input output succeeds, it will call back the third argument. It will call this function that you have registered with it, just how we in the last slide did functional arguments. And then here you'll do a console.log data. This is why pehle this gets rendered and then eventually, whatever logged, then eventually a.txt is read, print gets called for a.txt, eventually b.txt is read, washing machine is done washing your clothes, and then the data for that gets logged. That is why first you see done over here, then you see hi there, then you see hello from b.txt. Even though you might think intuitively, yaar pehle to this line of code should run, first to a.txt should get logged, then b.txt should get logged, then done should get logged, but the opposite happens. This is how asynchronous code works. This is as you can tell, much better than synchronous because you're handling two tasks parallelly. You're reading both the tasks, both the files parallelly. The other question you might have is, how did you decide the function signature? And this depends on whoever has written the read file function. Whoever has written the read file function has written it in a way कि भाई, the print function that you give me, right, I will call it, I repeat, is if you go inside this function, let's say, this is the definition of the read file function. What does it take as inputs? It takes the file path as input, this thing right here. It takes the encoding as input, this thing right here. And it takes the third argument, which is a function similar to op that we did in the last slide, right? If you remember, we did a function called op. You can name it anything, callback, op, print function. Let me call this op. And whoever has written this read file function, the developer of the fs module, whoever has written this module says कि यार मैं read करूँगा file, I will read the file and I will call your callback with, if there is an error, then with that error, and then with the actual contents of the file, hi there, or whatever is read from this file. To the developer of the fs library, since they call your function like this, first with the error and then with the contents, that is why you have, an error first function over here. Kyunki it just depends on these guys, how they call your function. This is like a very common pattern called error first arguments, error first functions, something like that, in which, whoever calls your function, they will tell you, yeah, if there was an error reading it, they will populate this with an error. If there was no error, then this will be null. And, the data will be the actual data that's printed on, found inside the file. Do we understand this? Let's do a quick poll. Do we understand callbacks and asynchronous functions? We have just introduced the very first asynchronous function, but there are like many commonly available asynchronous functions. In JavaScript, we don't understand it 70%, which is totally fine. We will go through this a few more times before we move on to the next slide. Again, for the 74%, I don't know if it's worth it for you to stick around, because for the next 15 minutes, we will debug, answer a few questions, and only then we will move on to the latent slide. So you can always just watch the offline video, or if you want to stick around, feel free to stick around. Let me take some doubts for the next 15 minutes. I'm looking at Q&A. Couldn't understand what you meant by the third argument. What is the function error? Like, what is the error over here? Great question. Why is there no parenthesis after print? That is also a great question. Why are we returning a function from a function? What does it mean and why are we doing this? Great question. Not able to see the poll. Recap. What if read file becomes faster than logging? So yeah, वैसे तो here doesn't matter how fast it becomes, you will still see the log first. I'll get to why, but we'll get to that in the latent loop. But even if it's as fast as possible, it will still log later on. I'll tell you why. So from any reason a.txt busy, then b.txt print. Yes, if a.txt is busy, p.txt will print first. Both of these have been parallelly started. अब washing machine पहले हो जाए, तो this will get printed first. ये पहले हो जाए, तो this will get printed first. All right. 12 to 15 line. All right. Cool. 12 to 15 is nothing. Ignore the 12 to 15. That was just me writing something. Few questions that people asked. Great questions. First question was, Harkirat, why aren't you calling print over here? And the answer is, let's go here. When I did this in Replit, was I calling sum over here? Was I calling subtract over here? No. I was passing the name of the function. Kya do operation. A is 1, B is 2, op is sum. This needs to be replaced by sum. If I pass it something like this, then what is being sent is what sum returns you. It's, if I call this, then what I'm passing in here is actually 3. I repeat, if I call the function, then whatever the function returns me, which in this case is 3, is what reaches over here. The third argument becomes 3. I want to tell it, bhai, this is the name of the function. This is what you need to call. I need to pass it the function signature and not what the function returns, which is why I don't call sum. If I do call sum, then that is the same as me doing this const s equal to sum of 1, 2 and passing s. I don't want to pass 3 as the third argument. I want to pass the function signature, which is why I am not calling print over here. I don't want to, if I call print over here, then what I'm actually passing as a third argument is what print returns, which it doesn't return anything. It returns undefined over here. So that is the same as me passing undefined as the third argument. We don't want that. We want कि भाई तू ले ये वाला function. This is the function that you need to call whenever you're done reading the file. Few people ask, Harkirat, what is error? If I put a random file name over here that doesn't exist, let me log error also. Error is error, and then let me log data also. Data is data. Let me comment this. Let me run node index.js. Error is not no such file or directory found. So what did the first argument become? It became something. It became this error right here if I passed it a wrong argument. But if I pass it a file that does exist, then error is null. The first argument is null. Data is high there. The second argument is data. So error first callbacks are callbacks in which the person who you are giving your callback, right? Washing machine is telling you कि भाई first thing I did not turn off, I did not fail. Second thing, these are your clothes. Similarly here, read file function is telling you कि यार first thing I did not throw any error. There was no error thrown. You should actually write code like this. If error exists, then console.log file not found, something like this. Else you should log the data. So this is a better function signature. If I now call it with a.txt, what does it return? It prints hi there. If I call it with a file that doesn't exist, what does it print? It prints file not found. So error, if it exists, means there was some error while reading the file. It could be because the file doesn't exist, the file was busy, you don't have permissions to read the file. Whatever the error is, you'll find it over here. Why have we done this? Why have we not done this, Harkirat? Data comma error or data comma error comma some third argument. Who decides how many arguments will be there? And whether error will be the first argument or data will be the first argument. And the answer is whoever has written the read file function. Whoever is the developer of this read file function. We are just using someone else's function. Whoever has written that function, they decide कि यार मैं जब ये call करूँगा ना, when I will call this, right, I will call this first with the error argument, then with the data argument. And hence you have to adhere to that. You have to, adhere means आपको उनकी सुननी पड़ेगी. You have to listen to the developer. If the developer writes it this way, expect print to have this signature, you will have to use that signature. Which is why, error is first, data is second. What were the other questions? Let's look in Q&A. What more questions do you guys have? Let me look at Q&A. Why done is get printed first? Great question. Let me write this again. Console.log done. Let's say I gave you two tasks. I repeat, I gave you two tasks. The first task is, boil water. Second task is, ghanti baja ke aa jao. Go and press the bell. You start the boiling water and that takes 20 minutes. While it is boiling, you go and you press the ghanti. Even though you press the bell later, you started pressing the bell later, since it takes less than 1 second to press the bell, while this takes 20 minutes. First, the bell operation happened and boiling happened later on. That is similar to what is happening here. Okay, even though I started to read the file first, since this doesn't take too long of a time, first this gets printed and this takes a really long time, let's say 10 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds. Whenever this succeeds, this function gets called and this gets logged over here. So the thing to understand is that you are not stuck on this line. This isn't read file sync. Read file sync will stay on this line until the file has been read and only then move over here. Jab tak file read nahi hoti, the control will reach here, stay here. Whenever the file is read, control will reach the next line. Versus when you have read file, which is an asynchronous function, you will start this operation and move on. JavaScript will be like, I have started read file. It is being read. Whenever it is being read, print will get called. I am going to move on to the next line over here. Then the next line gets called. And eventually, whenever the file has been read, print gets called, which is why done gets logged first, print gets logged later. We will be seeing something, a very nice visualization for this very soon. Okay, if you look at this visualization, let me quickly show you. Again, we'll do this in a little more detail very soon. But what is the code over here? The code over here, if you look at the left, it first logs hi, simple, console.log hi. Then it calls something, called set timeout, and it passes a function as an input. Now you might say, Arkirat, what is this weird thing? Let me define this outside. If you look at these 4 lines of code, first line of code is what? First line of code is simply console.log hi. I am logging hi on the screen. Then I am defining a simple function called timeout, which says click the button, some random thing it logs. Then I call this function called set timeout. This is also an asynchronous function. Just how fs.read file is a function that takes a callback as an input and calls this back after some time whenever it is able to read the file. Similarly, ये जो set timeout है ना, this function also takes a call back as an input, another function as an input, and calls this after 5 seconds. I repeat, this takes the function as an input. इसका काम है, the goal of this function is कि I'm going to call this after 5000 milliseconds or 5 seconds. What was the function of this guy? कि I will call this whenever I'm done reading the file. Read file calls the third argument whenever it is done reading the file. Set timeout calls the first argument whenever 5000 milliseconds have passed. So this is also asynchronous. This is also delegate the task and move on to the fourth line of code. So here also you will see first hi gets printed, then this function gets defined, then you delegate this task to someone else, then this gets logged, and then whenever this task is done, control reaches here and click the button gets called. Now there are a few components here. Don't worry about the components, just focus on the call stack for once. If I click on run, console.log hi came there, set timeout came here, console.log here, third line came here. Then the clock is running, too many things happened. Let's run this one more time. Let me increase this timeout to be 15 seconds. Focus on the call stack. कि यहाँ पे क्या क्या आता है? Whatever reaches over here. First this line of code console.log hi, then this line of code set timeout, then this line of code console.log. And meanwhile, when the set timeout happen, someone else is maintaining a clock. Someone else is reading the file. Someone else is waiting for 15 seconds. Whenever 15 seconds have passed, then this reaches the call stack and timeout gets called and this gets logged. This is why पहले ये log हो रहा है, then this is getting logged, and then this gets logged in the end. If you did not understand this visualization, it is fine. We will be understanding it very soon. But do we understand this code now, which we are calling an asynchronous function? What makes a function asynchronous? कि भाई the thread will not be stuck here. I will not keep waiting for the water to boil. I will move on to do other tasks. Whenever the water has boiled, the print function will get called asynchronously. Whenever it gets finishes, the print function gets called. Let's see if we understand this now. Do we understand the code that you see on the screen? Don't worry about the visualization that I showed you. But do we understand the code that you see on the screen right now? 92% is good. 91%, 90%. ठीक है. Give me 10 more minutes. Let me finish the last slide. The JS architecture for asynchronous code. And then, feel free to stick back. I will answer all of your questions. I am not changing this code at all. So any question you have for this code right here, I will be answering in just 10-15 minutes. Let me finish how this actually happens under the hood. How does JavaScript delegate tasks to other people? Just like I am delegating my clothes washing to a washing machine and making sure it will, ring a siren whenever it is finished. I am delegating boiling water to, my gas. How does JavaScript do the same thing? Firstly, let's look at a simpler asynchronous function. Let me comment this so we have this for later. Let me look at this code. Console.log hi. I define a function. Let me also define this above. I first define a function, then I log hi. Then I call the set timeout function. Now you might say, Arkiyat, where does set timeout come from? You have not imported anything from the top. Set timeout is available globally. So you don't have to do a, const set timeout equal to require set timeout or anything like that. It is a global function that is just available to you. I log hi. What does set timeout do? What does the name say? Set timeout schedules execution of a one-time callback. Schedules the execution of a one-time callback after delay milliseconds. The second argument is delay. The first argument is the callback. It will schedule the execution of this. कि भाई ये function जो है, it will execute after 15,000 milliseconds. That is what the set timeout function does. And lastly, I log welcome to loop. So can you guess how things get logged? First, hi will get logged. Then the clock will start. Okay, bhai, I'm scheduling this for 15 seconds. Since it is asynchronous, I am not, waiting on this. I am not stuck on this line. I can move on to the next line and log this. If I want, I can, do a for loop over here, do whatever I want. Whenever 15 seconds succeed, timeout gets called, this gets logged. If I run this, hi gets called, welcome to loop gets called, and after 15 seconds you will see click the button will get called, because we are waiting for the water to be boiled. We are completely free, and when the water gets boiled is when click the button gets called. Do we understand this? Let's do a quick poll. Here, you probably understand this. Let me do a small thought experiment. If you do understand this, let me decrease this time to 1000. Let's say, I say, yaar, 1 second baad timeout should run. This gets logged, then this gets logged. After 1 second, timeout gets run. And I put a very expensive operation here. For let I equal to 0, I less than a very big number, I plus plus. Let C equal to 0, C equal to C plus 1. Expensive operation done. Try to breathe in this code. This is a lot of code. It is fine. We'll try to understand this a little bit more. What am I doing? First, I define a timeout function. Simple है ये तो हमने पहले भी किया हुआ है. Define a timeout function just like we define a sum function. What does it do? It logs something on the screen. Then I do a console.log hi. Then I call set timeout कि यार ये function जो है ना, call this function after 1 second. What does this do? It will schedule the execution of timeout after 1 second. And lastly, I log welcome to loop. This is what we had done originally. What I have done after this is I have added a very expensive operation. This will take a really long time. This for loop might take 2 seconds, 3 seconds. After these 2-3 seconds, this gets called. Do you understand where I'm going with this? My question to you is, पहले तो hi will get logged, then this will get logged. Then do you think this gets logged, or do you think this gets logged? I can tell you this will take, let's say 3 to 4 seconds. This for loop will, keep on running for 3 to 4 seconds. This is a CPU intensive task. This task right here is CPU intensive. This task right here is IO intensive. This is waiting for input output, or more specifically in this case for 5 seconds. This is constantly working for 4 seconds. JavaScript thread is constantly working over here. What do you think gets logged? Option number 1. Option number 1. Hi. Welcome to loop. Expensive operation done. And then click the button. That is option number 1. Option number 2. Hi. Welcome to loop. Click the button and then expensive operation done. Given this code, do you think option 1 runs or option 2? Take your time, take like 30 seconds and try to arrive at an answer. Do you think option 1 runs or option 2 runs? If you run it locally, you will know the answer, but from first principles, try to think. Harkirat said, this though is a simple function, this will get logged. Harkirat said, this is an asynchronous function, which means this will run after 1 second. Then this will get logged. Then this Harkirat said is taking 3 to 4 seconds. This is a very expensive operation. So ab, does after 1 second timeout get called? Or does this for loop first keep remaining busy for 3 to 4 seconds? Then this gets logged and then the timeout gets called. This to should ideally run after 1 second, right? You have said set timeout by ye 1 second baad chalna chahiye. You should run after 1 second. This will take 3 to 4 seconds. So do you think this gets called first or do you think this gets called first? That is the question, right? Okay, does expensive operation done get called first? This thing right here. does click the button get called first? This thing right here. Breathe for 30 more seconds. Let me create a poll and we'll see what you're able to guess. What is right? Choice 1, choice 2. Let me launch the poll. Okay. 50-50-ish. Nice. 44% say choice A and 57% say choice B. 57% say choice B, which is incorrect. Option 2 is incorrect. 43% said option 1, which is correct. Let's try to run it. And let's see if that is actually the case. If I run node index.js, hi, welcome to loop, and let's wait. The for loop is taking more than 3 to 4 seconds. This is a very long for loop. There you go. Expensive operation done gets printed first. Click the button gets printed later. This gets printed first, which means option 1 was correct. Option 2 is incorrect. I totally get why you might have thought that option 2 is correct, because you said कि यार set timeout clearly says, ये line clearly says कि after 1 second this should run. So after 1 second this should have run. Why did this not run after 1 second? Because the thread wasn't free. I repeat. Tell me this. Let's say you start the washing machine and you are you are running on a treadmill. ठीक है? Okay. Here is an experiment, an example. In the real world, you start the washing machine on one side, while you go to another room and you are running on a treadmill. This is a CPU intensive task. It requires your constant brain. It requires you to constantly keep on running. This is a IO intensive task. This is like you have delegated the task to someone else. Someone else is washing. Now, let's say after 10 minutes, this starts to boop. After 10 minutes, this starts to, run, tell you, okay, bhai, I have finished washing the clothes. And let's say you started a 30-minute, you decided, कि आज तो I'm going to run for 30 minutes over here. So will you stop your execution? Will you stop your CPU intensive task and move on to the washing machine? कि भाई मैं देख के आता हूँ ये कि नहीं? No, right? You will keep running for 30 minutes. Even though this finished after 10 minutes, you will keep running for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you will go back here and be like, अच्छा हो गया तेरा, let me look at the clothes. So when you are doing a CPU intensive task, first that will finish. Only when you get free from here, do you look at all the pending things in the callback queue, which takes me to this loop, architecture that I wanted to show you. It has a callback queue at the bottom of it. Ignore everything else. This is a queue of things that are done. This is the treadmill telling you कि भाई मेरा हो गया, I am done. But you won't pick it immediately. वो queue में ही रहेगी. It stays in the queue. Whenever you are done running for 30 minutes, you will pick it up from the queue and run it. Let's try the same experiment here. There are 4 sections over here. Let me give you a brief of what these 4 sections are. That will make it much easier to understand why this code runs the way it does. The call stack. This means the thing that is currently executing. जो चीज अभी चल रही है. If console.log hi happens, hi gets pushed onto the, or console.log hi gets pushed onto the call stack. Call stack means the current stack of things that are being called. And it becomes a little more complicated as you have functions. We will come to what this is. If you've gone through the Rust video and gone through the call stack over there, it's the same thing. But here, it basically means abhi kya line run ho rahi hai. What line of code is running right now? If console.log hi is the first line, it will get pushed to the call stack. Set timeout is the second line, it will get pushed to the call stack. And it will publish something on web APIs. Now here is something more complicated. Breathe in, breathe out with me. I know it's a little complicated. Let's remove all asynchronous function calls. Let's make everything synchronous. Console.log hi, console.log welcome to loop A, console.log, hello. And then let me introduce a for loop. For let I equal to 0, I less than 10, I plus plus, C plus plus, and then, let C equal to 0, something like this. Let's say I have no asynchronous operations. I have all synchronous operations. There is no set timeout here. There is no read file over here. When that happens, this section becomes irrelevant. This callback queue becomes irrelevant. This event loop becomes irrelevant. Only the call stack is the important thing. If I run this, पहले ये आया call stack पे, then this came on the call stack, then this came on the call stack, then all of these are lines of code that are being executed are getting pushed onto the call stack. This visualization isn't the best, but basically I less than 10 and then C++ and then I++. All of these are one by one executing on the call stack. And then eventually console.log C will happen. Let's wait for it. Oh, did I push out? Rerun. Console.log hi happened. Console.log this happened. Console.log this happened. 10 iterations of code will run. Let's wait for the 10 iterations to happen. 3. Notice nothing happens here, nothing happens here, nothing happens here. Again, यहाँ पे actual में C++ will also run, I++ will also run. The visualization isn't the best, which is why you only see one thing. Last में this ran. Call stack is what the CPU is doing right now. What are the CPU intensive tasks that are running? If the call stack is busy in a for loop, अगर ये कुछ काम करे जा रहा है, then whatever is happening here will have to wait. I repeat, ये जो second section है ना, this web API section, this is all the asynchronous tasks that you have offloaded to the web APIs. What does web APIs mean? Basically means whatever the browser provides you. There are some things that JavaScript provides you. There are some things that the browser provides you. Believe it or not, this set timeout function was never part of JavaScript. JavaScript wasn't ever supposed to support this. This is something that the browser provides you on top. In this case, this is something that Node.js provides you on top. If you do a fs.read file, this is something that Node.js provides you on top of the basic JavaScript specification. The web API section, whatever you see over here, are the extra asynchronous calls that the browser provides you. Set timeout is one such call. If I put set timeout over here now, let me remove all of these, set timeout, and define the timeout function. Let me change this execution to look something like this. I first log something, define a function, start an asynchronous operation, start it, delegate it to someone else, delegate it to web APIs. This is going to be run / handled by someone else. My washing machine is independently running while I move on to an expensive operation. I start running on the treadmill. While I am running this expensive operation, and finally logging it, doesn't matter if 10 seconds have passed. Doesn't matter if the washing machine is done. I will not go to the washing machine and check on it until I've finished my task. So if I actually run this, you will see this in action. Hi gets put here, set timeout gets put here. The washing machine is running independently. The washing machine is running independently. It is taking its sweet time while I am busy running this CPU intensive task. The washing machine is done. It is able to push things onto a queue. I don't pick it up. I am busy running. After I am done, I pick it up from the queue and I execute it. Let's see this one more time. Let me increase the number of iterations to be 20. Console.log hi gets executed, set timeout line gets executed. When the set timeout line gets executed, web APIs starts a timer. It starts something for 10 seconds. When 10 seconds have succeeded, it doesn't tell me directly कि भाई हो गया ये लेकर. It only has the power to push it onto a queue. And whenever I become free from this CPU intensive task, which I'm running right now, as you can see, the call stack is busy. If the call stack is busy, it will not be able to pick things from here. Only when this becomes free, we'll be able to pull things from here and run this. Now that it became free, it pulled it and run it. Which is why, even though you write set timeout 100,000 here, doesn't mean it will 100% run after 1 second. If the CPU becomes busy like it did over here, then it might run after 10 seconds also. It might run after 20 seconds also. JavaScript cannot guarantee that. You are telling कि भाई 1 second बाद, after 1 second, push it on the callback queue. But whether or not it gets cleared from the callback queue depends on if your thread is idle. Now, if you're doing such an expensive operation, then of course the thread is not idle. It is not able to pull elements from here. It is not able to execute your callback function. Let's do a poll and see how many understood this in the first go. If we understand this, then tomorrow will still be hard, but not as hard, because tomorrow we'll understand promises. Oh, we understand this fairly well. 91%. Great. If you understand this, so let me give you an assignment. Think of one. So basically, if you don't understand this, by tomorrow, definitely try to read about promises. Try to at least Google ChatGPT, because if you go through tomorrow, right, then life is going to be smooth for you. If you don't understand tomorrow, then you will be stuck in this, promises asynchronous for a long time. So try Googling what I mean when I write this before tomorrow. Try to do some of these by tomorrow, so that tomorrow also you're able to go through. If tomorrow you're able to go through, iske baad to we will start simple full stack stuff, creating HTTPs, very simple stuff, I can tell you. Iske baad, no road blocker will come until you reach React. So please by tomorrow try to finish this, and we'll go from there. Great, okay, 92% understand this. I'm still here for doubts, but I think that's all I had for today's class. If you have any more questions, I'm sticking around here for the next 20 minutes. So let me look at Q&A for a bit and try to answer any questions you might have. Officially the class is done. Thank you everyone for joining. Tomorrow we will understand promises and async await, and then we'll go from there. All right. Halkirat, we want to write the same code read file sync, only done get printed when the callback contents does not get printed. Why? Okay, if you write the same code with read file sync, only done gets printed, the callback function content does not get printed. Oh, const fs equal to require fs, const contents equal to fs dot read file sync a.txt utf8 console.log contents. The read file sync function doesn't expect a third argument. You can pass it as many arguments that you want, but it doesn't expect anything after these two. It is synchronous. It will return you the contents right here, so you can log it. You don't need to pass a third function. If you do, that function will get ignored, which is why nothing gets logged for you. Error would be an object type. Why only and why only and why object only? Error, let's see what the type of object is. Read file, callback function, callback error comma data, console.log, type of data, sorry, error, node index.js. Let me change this to something else. The type is indeed an object. What's your question? Error would be the object type, and why only object type? Any time you're receiving errors, you might say, Hakira, it should be a string. Error can only be, whatever. There was an error reading this file. But a lot of times you need associated data with the error. You need the error message. You also need the error, status. Let's say, 201 file not found. You might need some extra data, metadata, permission denied. So, error is a good idea for it to be a complex object, so that you can extract more details on what the error was versus it being just a string. And again, this doesn't depend on you. This depends on whoever has written the read file function. If they want to return you an error object, they will call back with an error object. Should I use NeoVim as an individual developer? First learn Lua. If you don't want to do it, learn Lua, create your own config, go from there. What happens if I change the arguments? What do you think happens? Data error. Callback still gets called with first argument as error, second argument as data. So just because you change the names here, let's say I define function subtract a comma b, return a minus b. Let's say I write function like this. Now if I flip the arguments b comma a, what happens? I'm now subtracting it the other way. So do you understand this? अगर आपने a और b को चेंज कर दिया, your function is broken now. You are not subtracting first argument minus second argument. You are now doing second argument minus first argument. So if you change the names from whatever this to data and this to error, यहाँ पे फिर भी error ही आएगा. Now this data variable of yours will contain the error. This error variable of yours will contain the data. So that is what will happen if you flip the arguments. Who is passing the value of print arguments, error arguments? The person who has written this function. The person who wrote the read file function is calling callback with the right set of arguments. What was happening on replit over here? If I go to replit, who was calling sum? It was the do operation function, right? The do operation function, you gave it the function signature. It was calling the function signature with some arguments. And similarly, here to the read file function, you gave a function signature, and inside the read file function, if you read through it, eventually over here, if you look at the function signature of read file, look at how it actually, reads the file. Inside this read file function, callback gets called with, error and then the actual data. So for that, you have to look at the implementation of this function and how it does it, similar to how in our do operation key implementation, I call op with a comma b. So it depends on who wrote this function. They are calling this function, they can call it with whatever you want. Does functional argument and callback mean the same thing? No, technically not. Callback is more relevant as a term if it is an asynchronous function. If it is a synchronous function, then it's not the best thing in the world to call it a callback. It's just a functional argument. So you can think of this as the difference between a functional argument and a callback. Whenever it is being called asynchronously, which means after some time, after some ticks, then it's a callback. Otherwise it's a this thing. Is it necessary to create interface for Node.js to taking input? What does that mean? Are you asking, do you need to, when you're doing node index.js, do you need to wait for user input? You can, you cannot, it depends on you if that's your question. Flutter dev here. As per my knowledge, async code is awaited and the execution is stopped from moving forward till the code is completed. Is it different from JavaScript? I would assume it is the same in every language. I would assume Rust has concept of async await, works similar to this. I would assume the same thing happens in Dart. When I did a fs.read file here, it is being run in the background asynchronously by someone, and they will eventually call this callback. And I can move on to do other things. However, okay, maybe this is what happens in Flutter. We will discuss this tomorrow. But if I write something like this, read file, await. This is probably what you do in Flutter. Const data equal to this, and then console.log, none. So if you do this, then done will not get called. But that doesn't mean that the thread is busy waiting here. What does busy waiting mean? Ki thread yahan pe infinitely nahi run kar raha. It's not waiting here infinitely. The thread does other things. This code that we have written over here is similar to this fs.read file, whatever a.txt, utf8, you get the idea, callback. And inside the callback function, you have console.log, done. So this is probably what happens in Flutter. When you're awaiting, it is similar to you writing code like this. Whenever the callback gets called, done is written inside it. Versus if you're writing it in the async await format, then it means the same thing. That doesn't mean the thread is stuck here. That means the thread is doing other things, and will eventually come back to this done. Similar to how thread is doing other things, and it will eventually come back to this done. Link to the slides is on projects.hydexdev.com. pasting it in chat. For doubts in Discord, you have a dedicated web dev group. Ask it there. Monday interview. I don't think you can do much by Monday. But try it out. I mean, just breathe in, breathe out. Nothing you can do in a day to prepare for your interview. Standard interview questions maybe prepare. Is there any way to make set timeout be synchronous? What do you think? It's a good question. How can you make set timeout synchronous? You can do something like this, right? I'm going to write something. Function set timeout sync. While 1, let start time equal to. Now I'm writing some extra things here which you might not know. Let current time equal to new date. If current time dot get time minus start time dot get time is greater than 1000, then break out of this. Set timeout sync 1000 sorry, timeout console.log hi. So this is how you can make set timeout synchronous. What do you need to do if it needs to be synchronous? It needs to busy wait. It needs to keep the thread very busy. You are doing an expensive operation. A CPU intensive operation is happening. Then it will keep on running this infinite loop where it will check कि क्या time हो गया है. Has 1 second passed since we started? We started over here. Infinitely keeps on checking. Has 1 second passed? When the 1 second has passed, it breaks out of the loop. Then console.log hi there happens. If I run node index.js, you will see after 1 second hi there happens because now my set timeout is synchronous. It is not asynchronous. And how is it synchronous? I have written an infinite loop where it is checking कि 1 second हो गया, and after 1 second has succeeded, it makes the thread free. If you did not understand this is fine. It's like a side tour. Sync takes 8 seconds and async only 1, but sync messages get printed first and async at last. While in between, console gets printed. Posted a screenshot in web dev doubts channel. Which one? Web dev 1, web dev 2. I'm sure a TA will take it from there, but a TA will take it from there if you've posted in a web dev this thing. Is it necessary to create? I don't understand that question. I understood the async code. What an async code is. But what makes a function async? Like you call back print, which makes it asynchronous. How? Good question. What makes a function asynchronous? That's a good question. Anything that requires these browser APIs, anything that you offload to someone else, anything that is IO intensive is asynchronous. Or anything you build on top of it. Anything you build on top of it. Matlab if I write some code that read a function read from 2 files. If I write a function like this, then this is also an asynchronous function. File 1, file 2, because it will first read through the first file, which will take which is asynchronous, then read through second file, then return the response. So whatever file 1 response, file 2 response. So either all the functions that are natively asynchronous, which is the read file function, the set timeout function, the fetch function we'll discuss eventually, database calls we'll discuss eventually, either functions that are natively asynchronous or any function that you define on your own that depends on these natively asynchronous functions is also asynchronous. So this function is also asynchronous, but we'll get to this tomorrow when we learn about the async await syntax. Can you explain event loop once? Yes. So event loop, as the name suggests, is a loop that runs whenever the call stack becomes empty. The goal of this loop is to pull the first item from this callback queue and push it onto the stack so that the stack can start executing it. If this inside this was also a let's say very expensive operation, then what will happen? If I run this, let me make this 2. This gets logged, then the timeout starts, then the CPU intensive task is running. this is done. Now the call stack is free. Since the call stack is free, the event loop can pull things from the callback queue and start these. Now this started another expensive operation, and hence, that expensive operation will keep on running. If something else had been pushed onto the callback queue, it would have had to wait until the call stack became empty. When it would have become empty, more things would have been pulled. So yeah, something like that would have happened. All right. Now let me just open chat if you had more questions, so that's easier for me to look at them. All right. Can you paste your questions in chat? All right. I only have basic knowledge of HTML. Just said I had joined Web3. What it is right for me or not? Can I learn Web3 or Web2? You sort of can, but until React you should learn. The first 10 to 12 weeks, don't ignore. Do full stack for the first 10 to 12 weeks. Ignore after that. Does all async functions have callback? Yes, but there are other ways to write async functions, which we will discuss tomorrow. But under the hood, they all use either what are called promises or callbacks. So yes, most async functions either are promisified, something we will discuss tomorrow, or they have callbacks. Any research to learn more about async before tomorrow's class? It's a good question. Promises key videos, if you can go through, from wherever, doesn't matter, would be nice. Promises are very hard to digest. I don't have a resource as such. I just learned it by coding a lot, but I don't have a resource at the top of my head. But yeah, before tomorrow, promises, try to understand promises, more specifically writing a promise. The assignment that I gave today, writing a promise. If you can understand this, then you'll be sorted tomorrow. When will we learn about Git and GitHub? I'll post an offline video, like simple stuff. Or we can do it in a week live, but usually GitHub usually we cover in an offline video. Takes like an hour to finish everything you need. Arkiyat, how do we control the callback queue in my application to use those async functions as we normally do with sync functions? How do we control the callback queue in an application to use those async functions as we normally do with sync functions? I don't understand the question. How do you control the callback queue? You don't control the callback queue. You offload a bunch of tasks here. Whenever the tasks are done, they are pushed to the callback queue. What do you mean by control the callback queue? I will open the chat one more time. Can you elaborate a bit on your question? Maybe put it in a Notion doc with more, elaborate what you mean here. One suggestion, please add capacitor JS module so we can understand Next.js to make Android apps with Next. Is this okay? It's by Iconic, yeah. Why not just do React Native? This is good if you want to cover this, but now React Native is fairly easy to understand. I've done this Ionic framework in the past. Let me know, convince me if it's a better thing to do over React Native, and happy to do it. But I'd rather just do React Native. Fetch is already promisified. Yeah, I think so. I think Fetch is already promisified. I think it is promisified. Hey, I have a doubt. If the delay is 6 seconds and 6 seconds after completion the execution of the loop, it will take 3-4 seconds as 2-3 seconds are done while executing the loop. If the delay time is 6 seconds and it will take 6 seconds, no, it will not take 6 seconds after the completion of the loop. That is a good question. As you can see, they run independently. If you open latent flip, this expensive operation runs independently, and the for loop runs independently. So as you can see, even though an expensive operation is running here, the clock is also running parallelly. This is running on a separate thread parallelly. This is running here. So it'll not first wait for 6 seconds and then wait for another 5 seconds. This is waiting in the callback queue now. Whenever this becomes free after 6 seconds, it gets pushed over here. Good question. How would you know if do I need to use async function code or when I use synchronous? So for anything that requires IO intensive tasks, you should use asynchronous code. If you know you are going to hit a database, if you know you are going to read a file, if you know you have to use a set timeout, use asynchronous code. Don't use synchronous code. How do I improve performance of my code to prevent blocking the main thread from while handling long tasks like loop, for example, without dealing other asynchronous operations? So you can't unfortunately do that in JavaScript without getting fancy. JavaScript is a single threaded language. So unfortunately, you have a single thread. If you have a CPU intensive task that is running, that has occupied the thread, there is nothing you can do. All your asynchronous tasks have to wait. What you can do is spawn worker threads, which we can get to if you want, or you can start Node.js using this thing called the cluster module. Basically start a bunch of Node.js processes so that you can have multiple processes, one doing one task, other doing another task. Too fancy of a thing to talk about right now. No, it is JavaScript is single threaded. If you had 10 async operations, they're all waiting in the callback queue. They will keep waiting in the callback queue until your CPU intensive task is done. Answer that. What is the difference between import and module? Import is a more newer way for you to require other files. It was introduced in some ECMAScript. If you've heard of ECMAScript, if you understand it a little bit, JavaScript is just an implementation. Node.js is just an implementation of JavaScript. Every browser has its own compiler of JavaScript, but there is a committee that decides that JavaScript mein ye syntax hoga. This will be the syntax in JavaScript, and it keeps on improving. So require was the old way to import modules. Import, the thing that you've written over here, import and exports, are the more modern way to import and export modules. Harkiyat, answer that. You cannot control the callback queue. Can you write asynchronous code from scratch? That is a great question, and I think the answer is no. Can you write asynchronous code? You're saying without using any of these web APIs? Unless you can get access to libuv and spawn, I don't know. Maybe there's a way. I've never done it. I've never seen it being done. Whenever you write asynchronous code, you use other asynchronous functions that this web API section provides you. Can you write one from scratch is a great question, and I don't know. Maybe there's technically the answer is yes, but I've never seen it being done. You write your own asynchronous function from scratch. That's a great question. I'll probably Google after the class. Fetch is already promised. That is correct. How do we control call? So that people post the same question twice. But CPU has many cores. Does this mean the for loop takes all CPU cores? And if not, cannot set timeout use the remaining cores to execute? Yes. If this was Golang, this was Rust, you would have been able to do what you're saying. But JavaScript is single threaded. We discussed this last week. Even if you have 10 different cores, JavaScript will not use those 10 different cores. It will keep on running that for loop on the single call stack. It has a single call stack, right? It doesn't have multiple call stacks. It cannot execute one thing here and one thing in another call stack. So unfortunately, JavaScript will not be able to do it. If you use a different language, then yes, you can spawn threads. If you've ever used Golang, Rust, C++, Java, you can spawn threads and use all the 10 cores of your machine. But JavaScript cannot. JavaScript is single threaded by nature. There are ways to parallelize, create worker threads, and bunch of things that will allow you to use other cores. But when you're writing standard JS code, you have a single call stack, which means everything is running one by one. Can you explain more about the error? It is just something that whoever wrote FS module calls your function with. Agar meri washing machine hai, if there is a washing machine there, it depends on the developer of the washing machine, whether it should do a TT or a TU. Similarly, whenever you give the read file function, whenever you call fs dot read file utf8 callback, it depends on whoever has written the read file function, how they call your function. And the author of the read file function said कि यार मैं तो पहले तुम्हें error दूंगा, I will first give you the error, then give you the data. So over here in your logic, you should first check if error exists, then you should log something like file not found, or error while fetching file, and then if there is no error, then you should log the data. So this is how you should write code. This is what the error argument means. It just means that whoever was the maintainer of this specific read file function, whoever is the author of this, calls your callback function. You give it the signature, they will call it in this format. Formalize cohort 3 and continuing to journal. Great. Beautiful. Cohort 3 kernel. What does kernel mean? Like journal, a continuum journal of cohort 3. Link to slides, recorded videos, video 1, video 2, what happened, stuff to do. Harkirat, explore this. Great. This is great. We should bring this in house, sir. Aditya loves jujitsu@gmail.com. Let's talk on Twitter. Ping me on Twitter. Let's formalize this and put this somewhere. What if we are doing 3 to 4 console log statements below extensive tasks? Then first those 4 log statements will run, then your callback will run. जब तक आपका CPU free नहीं होता, until your call stack is empty, nothing will get pulled from here. So first all of those logs will run, then this will get pulled. How do we actually define someone? So the clone looks pretty good. Oh, the whole file, oh, that looks good. Is it responsive though? Isn't responsive, but that is fine. Would have been nice, like an extra thing to you. You haven't learned it yet, but still pretty good. The full website, very cool. What if we run 2 async functions and the second async function completes first? So the second async function will be able to put things on the callback queue first. If I have a set timeout of 10 seconds and uske baad a set timeout of 1 second, then pehle this will be able to reach the callback queue, then this will reach the callback queue. So this will execute first, this will execute second. If I run this, even though callback queue mein pehle ye gaya, sorry, web APIs mein first this went, but in the callback queue first this guy went. So first this guy will get pulled, then the 10 seconds guy will get pulled. Option 1 is correct. And the async, then what is the use of async set timeout in this one? Okay, it's single threaded. If you want set timeout before, expensive, how? If option 1 is correct, okay, what were the options? I totally forgot. Then what is the use of async set timeout in this one? Okay, it is single threaded. If I want set timeout first before expensive, how? Oh, if I want set timeout before expensive, how? That is a good question. Okay, मुझे तो चाहिए. I want के callback queue से पहले elements get pulled. I want to give more priority to something in a callback queue than something that is in the call stack. So you will have to keep flushing the call stack from time to time. There is probably a way to do this. That is a good, nice sidetrack you have taken. Okay, what if I want to respect the callback queue more than what is happening in the call stack? So from time to time, you will have to clear the call stack so that a thing gets pulled over here if there is something, and then restart the call stack basically. Let's see if I can figure this out, if there is a way to do this. I hope you understand the question. Someone said, I want if something comes to the callback queue, it immediately reaches over here. How can you do this? There is no easy way to do this. Like, there's no standard way to do this. It's like a very hacky way that I can think of. I might not be able to do it using that hacky way, but let's see. How to flush the call stack to prioritize the callback queue. Let's see. Call stack priority in JavaScript. Assuming a callback B and C both shall have been executed, run A after. This isn't what you need. Yeah, there's no easy way to do this. It is a very good question. How can you flush the call stack queue from time to time? And I don't have a good answer right now, but like a very nice experiment. Node.js might provide you a way to flush the call stack from time to time and then you pull back things. I could be wrong. So I'm sure someone is going to ChatGPT this and give some sort of an answer. So let me know if you find something. And I would be curious about this as well. No idea if this is possible or not to prioritize the async operation over this. I'll open chat very soon so you can let me know. Harkiyat, how do we control callback queue? So again, you cannot control the callback queue. I guess your question is similar to the other guy. Okay, how can you prioritize the callback queue and pull elements from there than prioritizing the call stack. How do you remember the syntax of more than one language? Don't you get confused? I don't have too many languages to go through, and you have helpers now. It will give you a red squiggly if I write Python code over here. It will tell me something is wrong. So it becomes muscle memory after a point. Can you explain arrow functions? Offline video I'll put, but like I can put it, I can do it, but we have very nice slow paced offline video from Core 2 that I can just put. High level, if I had to give you a 2-minute explanation, const read file equal to this becomes an arrow function compared to writing a normal function. Now why is one better than the other? Most cases it doesn't matter. In some cases it does matter. If you use an arrow function, it gets bound to the original object, versus here you see some issues. I can explain. I mean, we have an offline video. Even that video doesn't really cover the real difference. So I'm happy to cover the real difference, and when this becomes important, most cases it doesn't really, you can use them interchangeably. Some cases it does become important. What if, okay, answer that. All right, let's see if someone was able to figure out the call stack thingy that I asked for. Flushing the stack, if someone put something. Can we be resource to build a code editor? I have a Replit video, covers everything. You can look at that if you just want the front end and back end. But I have to build with a language that's not famous. If you have to build for a language that's not famous, and you have to look at the editor that you're using, does it support that language? A lot of times it does not. For example, the Monaco editor does not support Solidity, or maybe it does now, I don't know. But if you have a new language, you have to write the parser for it that will show you color correction, everything. That is the only hard part for a new language. Other than that, using something like the Monaco editor in React, or even I think it's supported in a non-React simple JavaScript application as well. You basically use someone else's editor, and join all the styles from there. Couldn't understand the error thing properly. Also, I feel so many people are doing much things FOMO sometimes. Don't feel the FOMO. If this is the first time you're learning it, error first callbacks. Google error first callbacks. They're slightly weird to understand. It is, I mean, it would have been nice or easier to understand if it was just this callback data error tiny. But unfortunately, this is how they've written it. Google error first callbacks. Why do people use? It's very common in Golang. Why error first callbacks are useful? Why they're very popularly used in Golang? And this is just one implementation of it. Should we use Ubuntu? Not the worst idea. Show the hack. What hack? Please explain how to make Google schedule calendar for 1 month topic where we can visit that topic before coming to the lecture. I will try. The problem is become I don't have the best schedule. I have the decent schedule in mind for web dev. For Web3, it's up in the air because Solana hackathon is happening. So I want to cover Solana first. So I might not be able to do it for Web3. For web dev, sure, I'll create a 1 month in advance thingy. Maybe create 2 weeks of slides first, so you can go through them before the class. All right, put set timeout in an async function and use await. Can it be done like this? No, that will not do anything. We'll discuss this more tomorrow. But if you put a set timeout inside an async function, it does nothing. It is the same as putting the set timeout inside a sync function. What you probably are saying, or might make this really async, is if you use a promise over here. But let's not go there. But something like this is maybe what you're saying. This is also not it. Set timeout of CB never mind, just ignore what I'm writing. I'm writing anything here right now. I mean, this is what probably you mean, but either way, this won't take away the problem of the call stack thing. And if you got confused by this, don't even worry about it. Let me just delete it. Yeah, I don't know why I wrote it. Put set timeout not related to class, but I've been offered a remote full-time opportunity as a backend dev. Pakistani company makes MVP SaaS products and sells them. Founder just graduated, has sold multiple products for 10k USD to US clients. What should be my ask? Pakistani company, AC company, Indian company will probably not pay a lot. I didn't want to say, said test me out for a month and then we can discuss. Month is a little too much for free, contributions. Maybe 15 days a week is good enough. Salary expectation number 1. How will you take money compensation from Pakistan, unless you're from Pakistan, that's fine. But if you're from India, make sure you figure that out. And number two, compensation is tough. This isn't a lot of money. If he's, I don't know how many of these he's sold. So it depends on how much money he has. Basically, that's a function of that. Generally, it's the best idea to ask them and force them to give out the first number. All right, managing the callback queue. Callback queue. ChatGPT answer. Callback queue, also known as the task queue. This queue holds the callback. Okay. When the callback is empty, the event loop takes the callback queue and pushes from the call stack. Microtask queue. This queue has higher priority than the callback queue. Tasks such as promises and mutation observers are placed here. The JavaScript engine flushing the stack and prioritizing the callback queue. To flush the stack and prioritize the callback queue, you can manipulate the timing of async operations using set timeout with a delay of 0 milliseconds. That is not what we want. However, it's important to note that set timeout 0 does not guarantee immediate execution. It does not. Okay. There is one thing you can do. Yeah, okay, there you go. There's one thing. This is extremely unoptimal, but you can do this. Set timeout, function 1000, function fn console.log after timeout. And the expensive operation becomes something like this. Here, even though there is a set timeout that calls the function after 1 second, and there is an expensive operation after that, after 1 second, after timeout will run. Let's see. Even though this is an expensive operation, and let me put a console log hello. Let's see. After did not happen. Increase the yeah, still will not happen. The thread will still remain busy. That will also not happen, will it? No, this will not do it. The thread will still remain busy trying to create more set timeouts. There will be one such fishy way to do it. So basically what will happen here is, every operation that you have that was CPU intensive, you are forcing it on the queue. I repeat, what I was trying was, एक तो तुम्हारी clock यहाँ चली गई. You have one clock here. This set timeout clock is over here. And then every CPU intensive operation I was forcefully pushing on the queue. I was creating a set timeout to increase C with a 0 time. This basically means it will get put over here and immediately get pulled over here. So what I was hoping for was, everything gets pushed over here and everything goes through the callback queue. And nothing is directly pushed onto the call stack, but this code won't do it. I'm sure there's a more tricky way to figure it out and do it, but it will be there's no point of doing it. You're just pushing more things onto the web API section for no reason. You're creating so many timeouts just so this gets prioritized over that. So yeah, there is some weird way like this to do it. If I write some more code, I'm sure I'll be able to figure it out, but it's just bad code. Like, you can probably do it, but you will never write it. You will never increase C. The C++ shouldn't happen inside a timeout with 0 time, so you can prioritize this set timeout over this. All right, cool. Anything else? Any more questions? Last call, guys. All right, a lot of questions. Could you give me cursor moving tips, shortcuts? I don't have any shortcuts. It comes with time. If you really want to dive deep into this, use NeoVim. Okay, duplicate the expensive function just below the expensive function and see how the first expensive function completes, then the second expensive timeout runs. Duplicate the expensive function just below the expensive function, then see the first expensive function complete. That won't do anything. I get what you're saying. If I have 2 for loops, doesn't matter. It is the similar as one for loop having 2 million operations. It's not like the thread becomes free here for a second and pulls. No, thread is busy here, thread is busy on line 17, thread is busy here. So it is not like इस line पे thread became free तो it will pull things from the queue. Web3 समझ नहीं आ रहा है सर, थोड़ा tough हो रहा है. I'm beginner. We're going slow. I will release a few offline videos. The good thing is everything we've learned until now is extremely abstract and theoretical. For example, मैं JavaScript के, if I would have gone into the depths of how JavaScript was introduced, it can be a little boring. So hopefully it becomes better from 2 weeks from now when we start some practical coding. How the Solana network gets paused from time to time? It hasn't in a while. People just keep saying, I don't know why. Why does it happen? As multiple. Sometimes there's a bug that's pushed. Sometimes there's this network being clogged. So Solana prioritizes shutting the network down over a hack. So whenever there is something weird that happens, the network just shuts itself down. And that hasn't happened in a while now. I know you tried your best, but teach us a few concepts like hashing, encryption, etc. was fruitful, but the new folks in Web3, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed about the signing and the blockchain process and how are they created and how they work. Can you give a video on some docs and how we can learn these things ourselves? I will. Akash, if you're here, make a note. But we were anyways going to release an offline video, but I can dump all the resources to learn these things in a doc. Let's say code is such the manner that timeout gets over before CPU gets expensive operation. Will the timeout callback be executed before the expensive operation? Okay, so depends. If the thread does become free, if the call stack is empty, then yes, it will happen. But just because the code reached an empty line doesn't mean the call stack is empty. It means it is still busy, and it will be more busy over here and then more busy over here, so on and so forth. So call stack doesn't become empty because there is a line over here. It becomes empty when the code reaches the last line. Now the call stack is empty. It is free to do, and then things will get pulled out. But until that happens, then no, you can't pull things from the call stack. Can you say more resources? So what I can do is, there's something I was thinking, was every video has an associated doc of external resources that you can look at for the same topics. That sounds like a good idea. I just need someone to do it. Find all associated. We create notes, but it's a good idea to have resources and references that you can look at from time to time. So if you want to be that person, ping me on Twitter, and then we can go from there. Can we make some own for FS to do operations? Can we create something like FS on your own is a good question. You will need access to lower level, libuv calls. Probably, I don't know. Probably you can write your own FS read file implementations, but don't quote me on this. I have only basic knowledge of saying, write for me, can I wait for Web3 without learning? Answer that. You can wait till learn till week 10 and then feel free to drop off from web dev. Any resources to get deep into async promises? Again, as I said, before tomorrow's class, I don't know. I'll post in Discord if I find. But let me structure this in a way for beginners. Before every class and after every class, there are resources. Yeah, a little more Hindi to appreciate. Sounds good. How do you prevent multiple callbacks to maintain queued code readability? That's exactly why we use promises. We'll discuss that tomorrow. Promises, async await. How to get over callback hell. How do we control the callback queue in an application? Okay, answer that. You can't control the callback queue. Someone is doing something. Expensive operation done. Someone just posted some code. He have a doubt if the delay is 6 seconds and okay. How high up have I gone? Why is this question repeated? Okay, there it is. In the hack session, the thing you talked about in the starting class. That hack means the thing that you just ignore what I said in the beginning of the class. Hi. Is too ambitious to complete week 2, week 3 to target super team hackathon for a solo contestant. I think you'll be fine. If you're complete beginner starting for the first time coding, then probably not. Otherwise, build something. Someone build a wallet, a web-based wallet. Add more complications in there. Let users create multiple mnemonics, multiple wallets. Let people link them with their OTP. Somehow add some Web2 layer on top of Web3. Please check my yesterday's assignment. Okay. The stuff's gonna be oh nice, looks so cool. Or leave blank to generate wallet. Clean, bro, very very clean. Show passphrase, high passphrase. And can you add more wallets? Current seed phrase. Very clean, I must say. Very very clean. I love it. It's very very cool. maintain all of these, and a doc, all these projects. This is very good proof of work eventually, because your project is clean. I don't say this to everyone, but if you're writing such good UIs, also looking out, this is a pretty clean UI. Someone is hiring my friend. Again, ping me on Twitter and let's go from there. It's the easiest way to reach me right now. That's the only place where I'm clearing notifications right now. Discord is the worst way to reach me. In DMs, Twitter is a decent way. A pretty good UI. I mean, great work. I would give you a bounty, but we can probably figure out, something better for you. To just ping me. But after the loop ends, set timeout function should run. Why does it run next console.log? The thread gets free. Okay, last question I'm answering here. The thread gets free after the loop. So callback stack should get called instead of the next line. Okay. Just because the for loop has finished doesn't mean it has become free. All of this line, all of this line will all execute first. Just because it is inside a for loop doesn't mean that ye CPU intensive hai, this will be pushed to the callback queue and this won't. Then this will get to push to the callback queue, and then the call stack. Then the call stack becomes empty. When you reach line 25 is when it becomes free, idle, when it can pull things from the callback queue. ऐसा नहीं है कि for loop run हुआ, this get ran, and then it will pull things from the callback queue. No. Until the thread becomes completely free, which means this is done, and this is done. Only after that will the thread pull more things from the callback queue. All right. Before tomorrow, please try to learn a little bit, read about promises, read about async await, because if you're able to get through tomorrow, then smooth ride for full stack development until we reach React. So backend will be an extremely smooth ride. Only middlewares will, इसके बाद middlewares will affect you a little bit, जो समझ नहीं आएगा, and then React. So next 3-4 weeks will be very smooth. If you're able to understand promises, please try to prepare a bit before tomorrow's class, and I will see you guys tomorrow at 8 p.m. We'll have to call it here, guys. Let's see if there's any question. All right. Bye. I'll just take 2-3 more doubts and I'll call it. What is the deadline for assignment for bound? There's no deadline. It just feels like this shows me effort. First week mein creating VS Code was effort. Everyone created VS Code after that. So second week mein creating private keys, an assignment that was not even discussed in class. It was at a last slide. Doing that is effort. This is what happens in the real world as well, right? Now everyone can create a front end. So who creates a pretty front end is what differentiates. This person is a good wallet front end that he created. So I'm like, everyone has created wallets, but this person went to the extra route. Whoever is going the extra mile, I just pick it very randomly before the class. There are better ways to win a bounty, which is contribute to a code base, talk to maintainers, and the maintainers will let me know. We'll clear them. All right. Good night. All right. I will try to create the calendar schedule for at least the next 2 weeks. I will try to create the slides 1 week in advance, so you can go through the slides and go from there. All right. Cool, guys. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye.